All right, so thanks for having me back. I took a look in the time machine, and the last time I was here was for a Civic Hall TO event in 2019. So it's been 4 years since we've been here. Let me turn off this unmute issue. Everybody who's online can hear me okay, yeah? Okay, good. Perfect. So let me just make sure. So who am I? I'm Mark Richardson. I'm a volunteer. I run an IT company called Rich Analytics, mostly doing work for the federal government. Have been working with Gabe and with Luke and with others on open data and open government stuff for a decade or more in the city of Toronto now. I haven't grown in my beard, but I've lost all my hair. So I was also part of the Toronto Planning Review Panel from 2015 to 2017, which was in the housing world and was part of the Community Advisory Board for the Open Data Master Plan from 2017 to 2018. What is HousingNowTO.com? HousingNowTO.com is a pro bono professional services collective. We work with lots of different people. My company, Rich Analytics, we also work with architects and planners and universities to try to make sure that the city is delivering on its own affordable housing targets. And we've been around since December of 2018 was when we started, and we've got a fair amount of traction over the years. We also collaborate with the Toronto Region Board of Trade, with University of Toronto School of Cities, with Toronto Metropolitan University's School of Urban and Regional Planning, and the Urban Land Institute in Washington, D.C., their Terwilliger Center for Housing. So we're really trying to just pull good ideas from wherever we can pull them. I see one of our former university student folks is here with us today. And we try to make sure the city is delivering as best it can within the constraints that the city has when it comes to delivering new affordable housing units. What do we mean by affordable rental housing in the city of Toronto in 2023? We're talking about people who are at or below the median household income within the borders of the city of Toronto. It's $84,000, $85,000 a year. Everybody gets some kind of government assistance now on their housing, even up to first-time home buyers, because you're waiving first-time home buyer taxes. You're also getting the ability to save in special tax-free savings accounts. But the further you go down the spectrum, the greater the level of government assistance has to be to make those units viable here in the city of Toronto. So we don't want to get too deep in the weeds today, but it's just good to know that there's a lot of muddiness between rent geared to income, social housing, and affordable housing. Rent geared to income is not what most people refer to as affordable housing in the city of Toronto anymore. That is, it is social housing. It is deeply subsidized housing. The average household in the city of Toronto that gets rent geared to income has a household income of $16,000 a year. The rent that they pay per month is about $425 per month. So there's a huge, deep subsidy. That's why there's such a long waiting list for those rent geared to income units, TCHC social housing units. Affordable housing, or workforce housing as it's sometimes referred to, is further up the income spectrum. So it's about creating housing that is for early childhood educators, construction laborers, retired pensioners, registered practical nurses, people who are earning, $30,000 to $50,000. A couple of those people in a household together, you're getting yourself into sort of an $80,000 range, $90,000 range. This building that we see here is a brand new co-op. Everybody talks about, we create a co-op. Co-ops are going to create a bunch of affordable housing. Well, this is a brand new co-op that's being built at Queen and Broadview, and you can see the rents that are there. A studio is running about $1,000 a month. A two-bedroom is $1,600 a month. The one bedrooms that are barrier-free, so that are accessible units, are marked down a little bit more to $1,200 a month. A three-bedroom is $1,600 a month. So that's quite a high rent for what you would consider affordable housing. But if anybody goes to look for a three-bedroom new rental here in the city of Toronto now, you're over $4,000 a month to get that kind of a unit. So this is still a deep discount against market. We work with folks at the University of British Columbia who have the Housing Assessment Resource Tool, or the HART project. They take the census information and they help break it down into what kinds of households we have in the city and how we need to accommodate them. So we're looking only at the city of Toronto. Anybody here looking at census data in any of the projects you work on? So there's census CMA, which is the census metropolitan area, which goes all the way up to Barrie, all the way out to Mississauga. You don't want to use CMA if you're looking at City of Toronto. You want to use the subdivision just for the City of Toronto proper. So that's one of the things that we focus on here. So HART has a bunch of great information on it. They've just updated all of their numbers for the 2021 census. They do this for a number of cities across Canada. We asked them to do Toronto first because we knew we were going to be talking to you and to other people this fall. So this is showing the range of household incomes and affordable shelter costs for each income category. So those area median income, like we said, is $85,000, but people in the moderate to very low income category, you know, there's almost a third or over a third of the people, households in the city of Toronto that fall into those categories. So people who can only afford about $1,700 a month in rentals. And the rest of the incomes, 63% or so, is above that, but it just gives you an idea of how big the challenge is. They also go and they look at the household compositions and the deficits within the households to see one person, two person, four person households, how many units are they missing? So just within the borders of the city of Toronto alone, we are currently missing 210,000 units that would rent below $1,700 a month. It's a huge, huge number. So 2018, John Tory was running against Jennifer Keesmaat. There was an article that said, are John Tory and Jennifer Keesmaat's affordable housing plans achievable, in August of last year? And being the civic tech nerds that we are and knowing a little bit about affordable housing, we figured that it would be relatively easy to track affordable housing development sites. It's not like people coming and going from the shelter system where there's privacy impact and you're not really sure you're tracking the same person. By tracking, city identifies a site, a city parking lot says it's going to be affordable housing. Does it become affordable housing? Or how long does that process take for it to become affordable housing? What are the challenges that that project experiences as it goes through? So December 2018, the city released its first 11 sites in a classic City of Toronto move for the mayor's #1 affordable housing program in December 2018. They released a black and white PDF with 11 addresses on it and a couple of numbers. No underlying data, no underlying details. So we worked all the way through from December of 2018 through January of 2019, pulling data, basically scraping data from various systems at the city, at the various agencies, Toronto Parking Authority, Green P, others. We worked with Map Your Property. Have you ever had Devin in here? No. So Map Your Property is a civic tech project. Evergreen had the affordable housing calculator. The Toronto Metropolitan Association of Planning Students gave us some of their student time. And we produced a Google map of all the sites with all the information we knew about those sites. And we created it as a Google map rather than an open map or something else. so that people knew how the tool worked. It was the same tool that people were used to using. So it's a free tool, public and global, works the same on your desktop and your mobile. The version the mayor uses is the same version that anybody on the street can use. And we just decided we're going to track these sites. As I said, we used the Ontario Affordable Housing Calculator, which Evergreen created back in 2017, 2018. I do not know if they've updated their math for these. So it might be worthwhile just checking it out, because there might be a project there in updating it to the construction costs and stuff for today. Since we launched the map in 2019, we've had 165,000 visitors to the map. And it's very popular. It gets a lot of attention. You're probably aware that there was a plan under John Tory, which was to create 40,000 new units of affordable housing by 2030. Mayor Chow has just added another 25,000 units to that. So now we're at 65,000 units. And we are breaking them out into the different categories that you see there, including 2,500 units that she'd like to see as rent geared to income, which we know rent geared to income are units that generally rent for under $500 a month. That's going to be a big challenge for her to accomplish, particularly since she's got a shorter window of her mayoralty because she was brought in through a by-election. The good news is that because we created the Housing Now tool, the city of Toronto actually did a pretty good job after a few years of creating their own housing data hub. It's probably one of the best housing data tools that any local government has created. They released it last year, and they've just updated it recently. There's a bunch of waivers and disclaimers on the data. The most important one is that they count approved in a pretty generous fashion. So a project is deemed approved. They may still be completing their planning approvals. The approval does not necessarily mean that they are construction ready. So we know that there are projects where the city has said, well, if you get through all your planning approvals, we would give you grant money or open door money to work on delivering these units. We know some of those projects are dead. We also know that there are projects that had originally 1,500 units in them, 750 as affordable. It's taken so long to get through the planning system, the costs have increased, the grants have reduced in value. They're only going to get 220 affordable, but the city's still counting the 750 theoretical units that they had before. But because the city at least now has its data out, you can go to the open data portal at the City of Toronto and pull all of the source data for this housing data hub on a site-by-site basis. So you can validate those numbers against reality. It's better to have the city doing that rather than just releasing these kinds of summaries that nobody can question the quality of how they made those assumptions. So here's an example of a site out in Scarborough that they're counting as 120 affordable units, but we know that the person who was going to develop it has had it up for sale for a year because the math doesn't work anymore. So you're probably not getting 120 units there unless the federal government comes in with a huge grant to make that project viable again. The provincial open data is really disappointing when it comes to affordable housing. Almost everything that we look at in the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Government, there are some things. There's the 10-year rent forecast. There's the Affordable Housing Information Management System. There is the affordable average rent. There is the unit rent factors for nonprofit housing corporations, and all of it, even though you can see it on the Ontario Open Data portal, all of it is flagged as not available to the public. And there are 3 data sets that are available to the public, and they were last updated in 2015 or 2016. I don't know whether that's a choice that was made, or there's so many concerns about the quality of the data. I would think that things like the 10-year rent forecast, it probably exists somewhere within the Ontario government, but the 10-year rent forecast right now is probably really ugly, and it does nobody any political favors by putting the 10-year rent forecast into the public domain. But it's a valuable piece of information, because we could actually say, this is how bad the problem is now, and this is how bad your own systems forecast it to be 10 years from now. So we'd encourage anybody who works in the open data world with the province. We're happy to have us off the record a conversation as you need us to have, the same way we did with the City of Toronto. We want you to be successful. Everybody says affordable housing is a #1 priority. And it's a challenge if we don't all work from the same numbers and we don't all share the information that we do have. And I'm not just here to beat up on the province. I'm also here to beat up on the feds. I mean, here's the headline from last year. CMHC won't reveal where billions of dollars in rental construction loans are going. So, you know, they've got this program, and because it is done in partnerships with private industry, the private party has to consent to sharing the information. So we can't even tell which projects are being funded by the Rental Construction Finance Initiative in the City of Toronto, and 24,000 units that were created have been redacted from the data set that's available, because the private sector developers won't even tell you the address, the location, the number of units. The feds should not be lending money at preferred interest rates without saying you have to disclose at least these factors as public open data information. And it's part of the challenge with an organization like CMHC. CMHC is not a core part of the federal government. It's a standalone agency, so it doesn't report directly to Treasury Board. It's hard to enforce those mechanisms down onto them. So there's a bunch of information here, our contact information at the back, some of the reports we've worked on with the Board of Trade, some of the work we've done with different student teams around the City of Toronto, and some information from CMHC when they gave us an award a few years ago. So I'm happy to stop talking now and answer any questions.
If you're online and you have a question, please put a Q in the chat.
Yeah. Anybody?
I think that cash flow positive. I didn't like break it even, because there was one there who was paying like 1,600 for a tree that was a pull off area.
Yeah.
So is that break even, or is that?
Well, it all depends on the grants and stuff that they're able to leverage to subsidize that. So nobody's building something that's losing money on day one. So it will be positive, but there will be a cross subsidy coming potentially from other units that they have within their buildings, or within their portfolio, or they may be recipients of direct subsidy grants from the province or the federal government. Rent subsidies are usually about $800 a month for a household. So if you take that $800 a month and you add it on to the $1,600, then it's really a $2,400 rent, but the tenant is not paying all of it.
Looks like there's one online.
Yeah. You can take the online question, Helena.
Yeah, that's myself. So, hi, Mark. Thank you for the great presentation. I have a couple of questions. I think some I will save that for the breakout rooms. But I'm wondering for the map, is it in your roadmap to sort of calculate some sort of like metrics or indicators for different dissemination block or like census area, like dissemination block or dissemination area, in terms of their people's accessibility to affordable housing there?
We don't do that. You can do that within the HART data from UBC within their maps. So you can go and you can go right down to, I don't know whether you can go all the way to the lowest level of the census. But they've got some really good tools in there. They've also got a surplus lands, government lands tool. It's only come out this year, and it needs some more refinement, particularly in the city of Toronto, where ownership of parcels is sometimes a little bit muddy between the province and Metrolinx and other folks. But I'd really recommend taking a look at that UBC HART website. And I'll share these slides, and it's got links to all the different sites that we work with.
Thank you.
No problem.
So I guess two. So one, the match at the beginning.
Yep.
I'll start again. The math at the beginning, is that normal? Okay. You said there's a need for more than 200,000 units, and the political plans, were like 60 something, and now they're 85 something or something. Now they're 65. Okay. Right. So that's sad. So the other part is, like, are there other big gaps that you find frustrating? Because I know, like, for example, like if you were to go on realtor.ca and look at rents, you wouldn't be seeing the whole market, right? Because some people would like put up a condo unit on Kijiji or whatever. And like, do you or like CHMC have like those gaps, and they're like frustrating because you don't really have a sense of, you have an accurate view of what's happening?
Get a somewhat accurate view. The pad mapper folks have a pretty good mix. They do a monthly rental report. There's a couple of other organizations that the challenge with the CMHC numbers is CMHC, when they calculate average rent, they calculate the average rent, including people who are sitting in a unit now. So if you were in a unit from 10 years ago, and you've only had small increases over that 10 years, your unit, what you're paying, so maybe you are paying $1,500 or $1,400 for a 2-bedroom apartment. You're pulling the average down. The other challenge is that the CMHC numbers are City of Toronto wide. So we know that there are cheaper places in the far edge of Scarborough, the north end of Etobicoke, that are more economical in their rents, but they're being offset by City Place and Liberty Village and places that are being developed next in higher price parts of the city. Whereas when you go to Vancouver, because Vancouver never amalgamated into one single government, the city of Vancouver's numbers are just for the geography of the core city of Vancouver. There are probably ways that we could break it out better. And I think the city is starting to realize that it's going to need to do something at a lower level of geographic data than that map that I showed, which is the entire borders of the city of Toronto.
Sort of two quick questions. You've got this volunteer pitch up. What are you looking for volunteers to do? That's the first question.
At the moment, we're do a lot of stuff. We're sort of in a bit of a holding pattern because in the last 3 months, there's been a new mayor, a new federal housing minister, a new provincial housing minister.
Ooh.
It makes no sense to round up volunteers to start working on something until we have some idea of what their intentions and directions are going to be. like our project started because John Tory said 40,000 units of affordable housing, and we're going to start with these 11 sites. So we started tracking those 11 sites. Those 11 sites are now 22 sites, plus a couple of other sites that are in the pipeline. But we haven't pushed so that we sort of think of us more as personal trainer and soul coach to the folks who are making those decisions, right? So we don't set a target. It's like you having a New Year's resolution and saying, I want to lose 20 pounds and run a marathon. Well, okay, you're going to need to diet and exercise, and you're going to need to change those things in the first couple of months of January if you're making that your New Year's resolution. All we try to do is sort of accountability buddy, right? Where and to make this stuff simple for people. So our target is always our materials should be consumable to a grade 4, 5, or 6 student doing their social studies homework. There's lots of people who are writing long master's theses on how to improve affordable housing, but almost nobody reads them. So how do we create content that is consumable by the media, by the public, by young people who are trying to understand this stuff? So that's sort of where we sit. Yep, there's a hand up in the back there.
Yeah, I did have a second one, but let's get around.
It was in the blue shirts.
Sorry. I think I heard about you talking about like some housing plans. They have like a certain number of like affordable housing plans, but then they kind of downsize themselves after years of plannings. Like, do you have those kind of trends telling like how much are they downsizing or where are they downsizing in?
Those within the data hub using the city data. If the city data was providing us point in time information, when those numbers change, I don't think the city, I need to look at the open data that the city's producing. I don't think the city has our previous affordable housing number in 2020 on this site was 120 units, and now it's 40 units in 2023. I think they just update the record of what their current count is. We know it because we've been watching the sites, and not all sites go that way. Some sites go the other way too. So there's there's a site at 140 Merton, which is just north of Mount Pleasant Cemetery. It started out at 15 stories, and I can't remember what the count was. I'd need to look it up. But over the years, that's become more financial challenge. The developer is coming back later this month and asking for 28 stories. So they've almost doubled the size of the building. They'll double the amount of affordable housing that's in that building. It's targeted at seniors, and it's targeted at Indigenous and Aboriginal communities. The reason why it's targeted at those communities is there's extra federal money if you're providing seniors housing, and there's extra federal money if you're providing Indigenous and Aboriginal housing. So if you hit both of those, you get extra money on each unit, which helps make the math work.
Two questions. So the first question you mentioned with an earlier question that a building like the one on Queen East would be making a profit with the subsidized funds and all that. So why would a developer not choose to build more of those if is it the availability of subsidized funds?
Generally, a private developer will not get those subsidies directly. They will need to partner with somebody to deliver those subsidies. So there's a building down in the West Donlands, sort of next to the distillery, that's just opening. I want to say there's like 250 affordable units in there, something like that. I can get you the accurate number. And half of those units are fulfilled through particular organizations. So March of Dimes, Costi, which is a refugee resettlement organization. And each of those organizations, in many cases in Toronto, we have not-for-profits who have subsidy dollars and no units to put them against. So when developers are doing an affordable housing project and they're trying to get to a certain threshold because of some agreement, their ability to partner with not-for-profit partners who have those vouchers, for lack of a better phrase, available helps improve the viability. The other challenge is, how long is that voucher good for? Is it a permanent voucher, or is it a 5-year voucher or a 10-year subsidy? You'll sometimes find with things like veterans housing, money will be put into veterans housing, but it will have a time period that you need to spend the money over. So if you're a brand new building, are you going to enter into, if you're going to pick between two partners, not-for-profit partners, are you going to pick the partner who has the longer term, more stable, affordable subsidy for 15 or 20 years, or somebody who only has a 5-year? Because in 5 years, when that money runs out, you don't want to be the organization saying, well, now these veterans need to move out because their subsidy's gone. Any goodwill you got for creating affordable housing at the start of your project, you're setting on fire in 5 years if that voucher doesn't last longer. But essentially, everything that is renting below $2,400 to $2,000 a month, anything that's renting below that needs some kind of subsidy or offset to make in a new building, in a brand new building. Older buildings might still be able to make that work, but if you have to construct a new building today in Toronto, that's about as inexpensive as you can get.
We have a question from online, from Isaac.
Hi, great presentation, first of all. My question is, does your organization prescribe types of housing that would make housing more affordable? I know North American urbanists love to talk about like the missing middle and how we don't have a lot of mid-rises, how it's basically just single family homes and high rises. Do you think more mid-density housing is a good solution to providing more low-cost housing?
The key word there is low cost versus affordable. Like, so a garden suite or a laneway house costs about $400,000 to $500,000 to build, whether you get it as a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. You can do a cheaper version if you're doing it as a kit. You can probably get it down to about $300,000. But in order to make the math work on that, and to rent it for less than $2,000 a month, that would be a bit of a challenge. The city of Toronto did have a grant program where they gave you $50,000, so approximately 10% of the value of your unit, as a 15-year non-repayable grant. But for those 15 years, you needed to rent the unit out at what they consider their average rents. So it'd be around about $1,500 a month for a 2-bedroom. I want to say there were like 9 people who took them up on that. But when they offered that, it was the difference between a free grant and a 2% interest rate wasn't that big over the 15 years. It worked out to be like about $300 a month in value. That $50,000 now, with interest rates over 5% over the 15 years, it's probably got higher value to you to use as a subsidy. So there, when you're talking about missing middle, it sort of means, what do you mean by missing middle? We really can't make much work. That co-op building that we talked about earlier, I think is 6 or 7 stories, but it's only like 20 some units. And they kind of built it for the amount of subsidies they had available. So there are no unsubsidized units in that building. Everything has some degree of subsidy to it. Whereas we looked with one of our university teams last year at a police station site, and that police station site, when we looked at it, we looked at only 1/3 of the units being affordable, but the rest of the building offsetting those affordable units. In order to do that, we took a little 1-story police station site on the corner in Leslieville, and it was 12 stories, 14 stories, 12, okay, 12, and a couple of hundred units, of which you got 70 or something that were going to be in the affordable category, the other 140. So to me, a 12-story building on a streetcar line is missing middle. Some people would say that that's not, missing middle is only like 6 to 8 floors. But if you're talking brand new build with only using the building itself to cross subsidy, then we call it supersizing your fries. Like that site we talked about on Merton Street went from 15 to 18 to 28 and you just keep, because you're already there. You're already building the building. You've already paid for the architects. You've already doing the construction. The cement trucks are already coming. So if you can add more height and density to that building and create more units, then your marginal cost on that extra floor isn't as big as it would be if you were starting on a blank slate in a brand new site. And there's another site down in Queens Quay, Queens Wharf and City Place, another Housing Now site. It started out at 8 stories and now it's at 26 or something like that. But it started out in 2016 at 8 stories. That was what the city of Toronto wanted to do. 8 stories in City Place seemed like a good idea to the city of Toronto in 2016. May explain why we currently have a housing crisis. Yep.
Maybe this will be the last one.
I know this is probably not in your data set, but from like these several years of looking through the housing plans of all sorts, what do you perceive as the biggest roadblock to us getting more affordable housing? Is it like bureaucracy, take a long time? Is it like the willpower of the developers? Is it the zoning laws? Like,
got out of all levels of government, got out of the affordable housing business in the late 80s through the mid 90s. And institutionally, they've all lost their muscle memory of how to get back into it. And like anything else, what did you pay for a car in 1990 versus what do you pay for a car today? The inflationary costs have increased dramatically. So if you go looking at a project from the past, the city and the province and the feds may have only had to put in $150,000 or $175,000 per unit into it. Now, if we're building in the city of Toronto, we're $460,000 to $550,000 a unit for an affordable unit on average. So $1 billion doesn't go as far as it would have done in the past. Institutionally, we also spent all of that time as a city, particularly writing rules and policies and guidelines and shadow studies and urban design standards and tower design standards. And we never put into any of them, these rules don't apply if we're building affordable housing, because in that period of time, that 30 years, nobody thought we were going to get back into the job of building affordable housing. So the city in particular has laid a lot of landmines in front of itself because it was designed as a oppositional system where evil mustache twirling developers came in and righteous councillors and neighborhood groups fought them to a standstill and haggled them to death. Well, now how do we deliver at speed and at scale if there's nothing that says those policies and practices don't apply to city-sponsored or federal-sponsored or provincially sponsored affordable housing projects? And to a degree, they don't apply. The Ontario line has a number of what the province is calling transit-oriented communities directly above them. So Queen and Spadina, King and Bathurst, Exhibition Stadium, East Harbor on the other side of the Don, the Carlaw, Gerard North site where the No Frills is, all of that gets a minister's zoning order. So the provincial minister just says, we're building a 25-story tower here, and the city just has to live with it. And you know, minister's zoning orders are controversial. Personally, I think they're like chemotherapy. They're toxic and they need to be handled with care, but used appropriately, they can save lives. All of the modular housing sites and supportive housing, the rapid housing hotel conversions, they've all needed a minister's zoning order. Should we have been handing them out on greenfield sites on the Greenbelt? Probably not, but there are times and places where they're very appropriate, and we're probably, if anything, a little bit chicken about using them in places we should use them within built-up areas to deliver affordable housing.